Luna here, and today we'll find out, can you beat Battletech with only close combat? First, the rules. We can only use melee, death from above, and support weapons, small lasers, machine guns, and flamers. This was originally going to be melee only, but we'll get into why that didn't work. No cheats or gameplay mods. Official DLC is allowed. Before we go any further, I'd like to take a moment to thank our channel members. In the You Broke the Tip Jar tier, we have Ginger Knight and Ugu the Monk. In the bigger tip jar tier, we have K Plays Music and Games, Blackwood, Ying, and David Bliss. And in the tip jar tier, we have Ragnarok, Bwezu, Ace of Kestrels, Tox, Jack1165, Naru Agility, Zachary, Thomas Quack, and Kenny379. Thank you all for your support. We pick custom difficulty to skip the tutorial, but all other settings are on normal. Of course, we still have to contend with my eternal bane, a starting mission where we can't choose our lance. We can't modify our mechs, and only the Vindicator piloted by Glitch has a support weapon, one small laser. While any mech can melee attack, our pilots are literally incapable of punching the broadside of a barn, and only vehicles and mechs can be meleeed. I found instances where we could bait enemies into destroying buildings for us by standing near the offending building with high evasion and hoping missed shots hit the building. As you can see, this helped greatly against the first generator, but it isn't always an option. There's at least one point in the campaign where we have to destroy turrets, which can't be meleeed unless they happen to be on the ground, which is rare. The turrets that I'm thinking of are high up on a sheer cliff, so we'll need something to shoot them with. Even if we could stand near them, stray shots never seem to hit friendly mechs, turrets, or vehicles, only buildings. To be honest, I'm worried support weapons won't be able to reach them either, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. You already saw how we dealt with the generators, but we also had to take down 3 mechs and several vehicles in the starting mission, all while being careful not to lose the small laser we needed to destroy the second generator at the end. This was mostly handled by our other 3 mechs. Vehicles take double damage from melee, so even our light mechs' pitiful punch one-shot them. Our medium mechs had to handle the enemy mechs, though. We got help from our employer's turrets, and thankfully, one of those turrets was lost in the scuffle, so we won't have to deal with it when our employer turns on us. But a second turret held on by a hair. Once the first 2 mechs were down, Glitch sprinted up to the generator, shot it with her small laser, and danced around to draw stray shots from turrets. It went so well that the last turret destroyed the generator, blowing them all up. Sadly, the armor on Glitch's left torso was breached, and the small laser is on her left arm, so if the left torso goes, so does our laser. In retrospect, we should have had one of the other mechs do the shoot-me-in-the-face dance in front of the generator to spare Glitch's armor. From there, we had the light mech run down a couple vehicles, while our medium mechs played Rock'em Sock'em with the enemy Shadowhawk that touched down. It took so many hits, and running in close left us vulnerable not only to its melee, but also rear strikes with its weapons. We lost armor, but we removed the vehicles and piled on the Shadowhawk before it could destroy anything. From there, we had to take down our treacherous employer's vehicles and turrets, and we probably should have taken a turn to finish off the turret with 1 HP and a dream, but that would have meant drawing the battle out another turn when it was already going to take at least 5 to take out the generator with our 1 small laser. We had Glitch jet jump as much as possible and used Vigilance to brace her to reduce damage and make her a less appealing target. The AI likes to aim for damaged targets like Glitch, but things like weapon range and hit chance are also taken into account, so we tried to set up our Blackjack and Shadowhawk to be more tempting targets. They took significant damage, but we kept everyone intact long enough to destroy the generator and win the mission. We don't want to be in more situations like that, so our mechs are overhauled. I considered keeping the light mechs as their mobility would be an asset, but I'm convinced they'd be crushed and their melee damage is not great, so we sold them and salvaged machine guns from the Locust. We also bought small lasers, flamers, and machine guns and put them on our medium mechs. However, they only have 1 or 2 support hardpoints apiece. This is the case for many mechs, and some exceptions are made of paper. The Firestarter is the lightest I'd consider at 35 tons. The Vulcan VL-2T is another option. It's only 40 tons, but it has a CQC suite that grants 10 melee defense and roughly doubles support weapons range. The 45-ton Hatchet Man has impressive melee damage, but it's on the slow and fragile side, and oddly, only the HCT-3X has support hardpoints, a glorious 2 of them. The PHX-1B Phoenix Hawk has 4 hardpoints, but that's the Royal Hawk, which, to the best of my knowledge, can only be bought at a staggering price on the black market. One variant of the 65-ton Catapult, the CPLT-K2, has 4 support hardpoints, even though I've always seen it as a missile boat. But a JM6-X Jaeger mech will likely perform better due to its speed. There's also a Warhammer, the WHM-6D, and a Marauder, the MAD-BH, with 4 hardpoints at 70 and 75 tons respectively. Some Awesomes and Highlanders have 3 hardpoints, but if we're shopping for assault mechs, the Banshee BNC-3M wins hands down with a whopping 6, along with lots of armor and solid mobility for an assault mech. That being said, larger mechs tend to be slower and have lower initiative, which may be an issue if faster enemies are smart enough to stay out of range. There are ways to boost our initiative or lower an enemy's, but it may be wise to have a couple mechs in the medium and heavy classes. That's for later, though. For now, we fly around 4 backwater systems to train our Mechwarriors. The gunnery skill helps us land shots with our support weapons, but its abilities are useless when our weapons have at most 300 meters max range, and that's assuming we're using an extended range small laser on a Vulcan, and that's still less than a medium laser. For the most part, we'll only have 90 meters max range, which in this game is point blank. If a larger mech had the Vulcan CQC suite, maybe we could work something out with a gunnery Mechwarrior, but it can't be put into other mechs. As it is, multi-shot will rarely be worthwhile unless enemies cluster tightly together, and breaching shot will be situational at best. 40% damage from 3 small lasers is better than 100% from 1 small laser. We should also have an easy time circling around for rear shots that ignore damage reduction anyway. With that in mind, we dismiss Glitch as she's already locked into gunnery abilities, and we must avoid raising other Mechwarriors' gunnery above 4 until they've taken 2 other first-rank abilities. Most of them will probably take Sure Footing and Ace Pilot from piloting, and Bulwark from Guts for extra damage reduction and evasion, but the extra initiative from Tactics' second ability may prove useful once we have heavier mechs. However, Tactics' other benefits, lowering weapons' minimum range and the penalty for indirect fire, won't be useful, although Called Shot Mastery may be somewhat helpful. Guts' health will be nice and its higher heat threshold may come into play, but piloting's melee accuracy, defense, and sprint distance will, unsurprisingly, be the most helpful bonuses. We also purchase arm and leg mods to improve our melee and death from above attacks. Leg mods either improve the damage death from above inflicts or reduces the damage we take from landing on an enemy. Arm mods improve either the raw damage of our melee strikes or their stability damage, making them more likely to knock enemies over. Knockdowns reduce initiative and injure the pilot. Inflicting enough injuries can incapacitate the pilot and by extension their mech. I typically stick to weaker, weightless mods to save weight for weapons and armor, but we have tonnage to spare. Mechs have armor and jump jet limits, and support weapons are very light, usually half a ton or 1 ton at most. We don't even need many heat sinks. Small lasers are the hottest standard support weapons, but compared to larger weapons, they run fairly cool, so that's more weight saved. Most of our mechs are several tons underweight, as the game is eager to point out every time we launch a mission. So if we find useful upgrades with weight, we will gleefully use them. We also switch to small lasers completely instead of machine guns. They deal more damage, are more accurate, and don't require ammo. They run hotter, but removing the ammo bins frees up enough weight for a couple heat sinks on its own. Ammo bins also have a tendency to explode if the part they're in takes a hit that punches through armor, which injures the pilot, so I'd like to avoid having them if possible. I hoped to have a fourth mech before visiting Axylus, but the contracts available were pitiful and we found ourselves low on cash, forcing us to bebop our way to our mysterious benefactor. The first part of the battle that's normally a cakewalk was the hardest part for us. There were turrets we couldn't punch, as well as a few vehicles. We took down the nearest turret with our small lasers as we jumped in. Ideally, we'd have hit the generator and destroyed all the turrets before they could act, but we couldn't reach it without sprinting, and taking out one turret was better than nothing. From there, we incinerated the generator with our lasers and stomped the vehicles into scrap. We kept jumping as far as possible while staying in range of our targets to keep our evasion high, but there was no cover and thus no damage reduction. Our armor wasn't breached, but we took damage. The light mechs outside the Argo were barely an obstacle. One of them made a nuisance of themselves by jumping onto a cliff with no room to jump next to them, but we cut them apart with lasers as we played hopscotch on their locust's face. The Shadowhawk and Quick Draw were tough, but we were near where they spawned and commenced the pummeling immediately. The Shadowhawk was destroyed, but we disabled Grim Sybil with knockdowns, so we salvaged her entire Quick Draw. Sadly, it proves to only be extra cash as it lacks support hardpoints entirely, and the game will not let us field a mech without weapons. I suppose we could add a medium laser or something and not use it, but I'd rather not do that when we can easily avoid it. With the Argo limping off to be sanitized, we're free to visit a system that has a good chance of selling upgraded small lasers. It's also near systems with mods and gyros. We have to leave and return to systems to refresh stores, so having two good systems to fly between keeps both halves of the travel useful. Of course, we have to do contracts to fund the upgrades and our day-to-day existence. They're more profitable than anything we had access to before, but they're also harder, and the weaknesses of our melee obsession are becoming apparent. I'll draw comparisons to the tabletop, but I'll preface them by declaring my complete and utter ignorance as I've only watched tutorials of it. The tabletop has a variety of attacks. Punches, kicks, pushes, hell, you can pick up a tree and club things with it. They all have modifiers and effects, like punches having a 1 in 6 chance of hitting the target's head, which is usually an instant kill, or kicks being likely to hit the legs. But none of that exists for us. Our mechs have one attack, even if they occasionally use different animations for it. I emphasize the tabletop's ability to target different areas with different attacks because we have next to no ability to do so. We can focus on a side or the back with positioning, but that's it, even if the target is prone. No free face stomps for us, and certainly no pushing off of cliffs. In fact, if the target is prone, we can't hit their back at all, which is occasionally a problem. Some simplicity works for us. Unless we lose mods, system damage or even losing limbs doesn't affect our melee damage or accuracy. It was Death from Above that prompted me to look up tutorials in the first place. It has much lower accuracy than normal melee, and the leg damage makes missing painful, so I wanted to see if that was the case in the tabletop. It partly is. The piloting checks are more difficult than other melee attacks, but there are inconsistencies. According to a thread in the Paradox forums, the melee damage numbers overall are fudged a bit, and Death from Above's self-damage is significantly higher than the tabletop. A mech that's specialized in Death from Above, the Highlander, is also present, but lacks any innate Death from Above advantages. The devs could have given it inbuilt leg mods, if nothing else. The entrenched and guarded buffs don't reduce the self-damage either, so using vigilance beforehand won't help, although it'll reduce any other damage we take that round. I rarely use Death from Above, which appears to be the sane response, but it's one of few offensive melee options when closing in, as we can't sprint into a melee charge. We can only use our walking speed, and if cliffs are involved, our options get even more limited. so expect to see death from above occasionally. My initial assessment of which Mechwarrior abilities are best for melee was wrong. Piloting's passive bonuses, melee accuracy, sprint distance, defense, and unsteady threshold are crucial, but its abilities aren't panning out. We get extra evasion from sure footing when charging into melee or jumping, but not when standing and punching. Sure footing's second benefit is also sketchy. It grants entrenched, cutting stability damage in half and removing instability we've built up, helping us avoid knockdowns. Sounds good, right? Yeah, except we don't get entrenched from sure footing when sprinting, jumping, charging into melee, or standing and punching. As a result, we almost never get entrenched from sure footing as it requires losing evasion and distance from sprinting or jumping, or damage from melee or death from above. We occasionally use it to remove instability, but it's better to use vigilance as it can be used before jumping or meleeing, and it entrenches and braces us, albeit at the cost of resolve, but we're working on maxing out morale so we generate more resolve anyway. Piloting's second ability, Ace Pilot, allows us to move after attacking if we haven't moved yet, but it doesn't trigger after melee even if we punch without moving. To be fair, its tooltip says after shooting, but it feels odd that piloting's passive benefits are melee-oriented, while its abilities are partly or entirely disabled when meleeing. To be clear, a mech built for flanking and melting rear armor with ranged weapons may find piloting's abilities life-saving, but they're shockingly useless for brawlers. It would have been best to pick Bulwark, Sensor Lock, and Master Tactician from Guts and Tactics, so that'll be the route we take with future Mechwarriors. Ideally, they'd take Sure Footing instead of Sensor Lock, as the extra evasion is still useful a lot of the time, but we can only take second rank abilities from skills we took a first rank ability in, and Master Tactician's initiative boost is far better for us than Ace Pilot or Coolant Vent. Sadly, our current Mechwarriors were locked into piloting's abilities, so meet our new ones, Gale, Spud, Root, and Itchy. We now sound like a bunch of potato farmers who decided to become mercenaries. Our commander is still around, but she's relegated to being a backup pilot as she's stuck with piloting abilities. After many in-game months of grinding, we launch the next priority mission. Before we start, here are our mechs. All of them have as much armor and as many jump jets as possible, as well as about half a dozen heat sinks apiece. The heat efficiency bar is unreliable, and without the heat sinks, constant jumping and alpha strikes with our small lasers would cause overheating despite the maxed out bar. Our mechs also have leg mods that reduce death from above self-damage, various arm mods that increase our melee attacks, and gyros that improve defense. So far we've only found weightless ones. Hopefully stronger ones show up as we progress the campaign. Our Black Knight has 4 small pulse lasers, which are heavier and hotter but deal more damage than upgraded small lasers. 2 of our Warhammers have 4 extended range small lasers, giving them nearly double the range as well as equivalent damage to an upgraded small laser, and our 3rd Warhammer has a mix of small pulse lasers and upgraded small lasers. Our Mechwarriors are still fairly green as I settled on the new training near the end of the grind, and the game eventually stops generating random contracts if we don't do a priority mission. Gale got a few more contracts than the others, so she has all 3 of her abilities, but her piloting is still mediocre and the others only have first rank abilities. Bringing the prisoners on Weldry proves harder than normal as we continue to struggle against turrets. It's not nearly as bad as the first mission now that we have heavier mechs with multiple weapons apiece, but we still have to get quite close to the turrets or their generators to take them out, all the while taking fire from the turrets and enemy mechs and vehicles. However, our mechs can take a hell of a beating, and while our armor was looking rough by the time we breached the prison walls, we were still intact. Kamea, our client, joins us at this point, but she isn't under our control, so she's free to use whatever weapons she wants. A few mechs were waiting inside, but they're all smaller than us, so we scrap them before they can do any serious damage. We have to do a few random contracts to trigger the next priority mission. Passing time traveling won't do it. So if you notice our mech warriors gaining new abilities between priority missions, that's where they got the XP. The next priority mission on Panzyr was far rougher. First, we have to crush some vehicles so restoration engineers can take control of the enemy turrets in the spaceport. Normally this is trivial, but there's a short-range missile carrier that can decimate us. If our mech warriors were more skilled, the defense from piloting might have mitigated the damage when combined with evasion to make more of the missiles miss. But as it is, we have to crush it before it gets a chance to attack. We use the buildings and walls to block its sightlines as we jump closer, and take out any other vehicles that happen to be in range, but the short-range missile carrier just keeps staying back. One of our mechs takes a barrage from it that melts most of its armor, but we scrap it before it can do further damage and hack the turrets. They aren't under our control, so they can shoot freely. We sensor lock a couple mechs as we close in to reduce their evasion and help the turrets hit, but once we're up close it turns into a slugging match. None of the mechs are bigger than us, only the dragon comes close. But the Centurion, Hunchback, and Trebuchet are big enough to take a hit or two, and they do their best to take advantage of our weakened armor, destroying one of our arm mods in the process. But we beat them into submission before losing anything else. Our next priority mission has us securing an ammo cache in the desert. We have no hope of stopping the fleeing vehicles. They have 4 initiative and always get a move before we can act, allowing them to get well out of range of our extended range small lasers right after they spawn. If we'd brought a lighter mech with more movement and higher initiative, we could have gotten them, but they're optional, so we focus on the mechs. The fire starter gives us fits. Jumping and firing lasers, even small ones, plus getting hit with flamethrowers is too much for our heat sinks in this biome, but we scrap it before it shuts us down. None of the other mechs are particularly dangerous, but we have to avoid the blast radius around the ammo crates. I'm not sure if the AI would sacrifice its units to destroy us by blowing up the crates, but it tends to be bloodthirsty and lacking in self-preservation, so we're not risking it. Next, we have to take out the Newgrange, a dropship smuggling weapons to the Directorate by blowing up a fuel pump. There's a timer that Kamea panics over with 5 rounds left, but we have more than enough time to clear off the enemy lance and the 2 turret generators. Getting to the generator on the right is easy, as it's up on the cliff we start on and is more or less en route to the fuel pump. But the second generator is back in the far corner of the map, so we take hits from its turrets while we're brawling with the enemy lance. 3 of our mechs handle that while the 4th works on the fuel pump. Thankfully, the blast radius isn't as big as you'd think, so we can shoot it with small lasers safely. However, we hold off on the last shot to give the rest of our lance time to move near the landing pad where Victoria's lance will touch down as soon as we destroy the pump. We still take a couple shots in the back from them that could have been avoided if we'd moved before destroying the pump. I thought we'd have a chance to move, but initiative does weird things when story events happen and new enemies spawn in. In this case, I think it started a new round without giving us a chance to finish the round we were in. Thankfully, this didn't cause any catastrophic damage. We lost one of our gyros, but we have replacements. Their fire starter once again gave us near overheats, but we scrapped it quickly. The Centurion only took a couple punches, so it didn't do much either, but the catapult was surprisingly aggressive and took a couple rounds to put down. Victoria was easier to beat, although that may have been because she was stupid enough to melee us. Normally that's worrying, but in this run it saves us a lot of trouble when foes are dumb enough to get close. We were able to do those priority missions back to back, but now we're back to random contracts until the next priority mission appears. We have access to a few more useful systems that sell upgraded limb mods and gyros now, but I noticed oddities. Upgraded gyros are a no-brainer if we have the cash, as they offer extra defense for no additional weight or space. Upgraded leg mods, on the other hand, weigh a bit, so they're only worth it if we have weight to spare and we're committed to landing on enemies. In this run, both of those things are true, but in normal play, I'd prefer having more weapons. Upgraded arm mods are downright puzzling. You'd think they'd shine in this run, but so far they've been questionable at best. They have weight, which is in line with upgraded leg mods, so I'm not surprised, but they also take up more slots. I'm not talking one more slot, which would already be enough to reduce the max number of arm mods per arm by 1. I'm talking 2 to 4 more slots. So they're 2 to 3 times larger than standard arm mods in addition to having weight. It might work if their damage scaled enough, but so far they've been equivalent to or worse than multiple standard arm mods that fit into the same space. Granted, that's assuming we have good standard arm mods, because for some reason a 5 damage arm mod and a 10 damage one are both considered standard, adding a hint of unnecessary confusion. But the point is, there's no reason to use upgraded arm mods in a melee run. I don't know if this quirk is also in the tabletop or if it's the result of the devs fudging numbers, but I hope we find worthwhile arm mods later because we have weight and cash to spare. We have to deal with Castle Nautilus next, so we're stuck with Kamea again, and this time she's part of our lance. On one hand, this means we don't have to protect an AI ally, but on the other, it means she can't use her ranged weapons. She has a decent melee attack though, so she's not a total dead weight like in our Blackjacks only run. Of course, our access codes to the bunker are invalid and trigger the automatic defenses. There's no cover, but we can brace when we're out of range or use vigilance before attacking to take advantage of our unit's bulwark ability. And the drones are considered vehicles, so they're scrapped by a successful stomp from mechs of our size. We trash the first wave of drones to trigger the 4 turrets near the bunker entrance. I was worried our support weapons wouldn't be able to reach the 2 turrets on the higher pillars closer to the door, which is why we brought our commander to jump around in a Vulcan that has doubled support weapon range. It also has 6 jump jets, allowing it to easily leap up the cliff. But it turns out I needn't have worried. Our other mechs can target all the turrets with their extended range small lasers, and the countdown to the door opening started before we even destroyed all the turrets. Our mechs and pilots evac to deal with the mess the unauthorized codes made of our ship while Kamea enters the bunker. Of course, she's ambushed by the superpower aiding the Directorate, the Taurans, so we have to help Kamea retreat with the mechs they were able to get running. We don't care about the mechs or pilots with her. They'll be running headlong into danger as a distraction. Only one has a support weapon, a single small laser, so we'll be punching our way out, and as far as I know, these mechs lack arm and leg mods. They're big, even the Griffin is over 50 tons, so they have good base melee damage, but the bigger mechs are lacking in mobility. 2 of them, including Kamea's Atlas, don't have jump jets, and the one with jets must have only 2 as it can barely hop, leaving only the Griffin with decent mobility. The pilots haven't been indoctrinated into our Rock'em Sock'em style and have normal initiative and movement. Their melee accuracy isn't the best either, especially when using death from above, compounding our problems. If the enemies had even room temperature IQ, they'd shoot while running away. A couple locusts with Ace Pilot could run circles around us, but the AI keeps hurling its forces into melee range as we menacingly slow walk towards them like slasher villains. That being said, we take a lot of damage in the first wave as we push towards the fake evac. The Taurans refused to destroy the dropship until we were very close. I thought the Griffin was going to be blown up. But we cleaned up the first wave so we weren't being shot in the back on the way to the real evac on the other end of the map. We didn't have enough health left to win a brawl against assault mechs, but we'd kept Kamea relatively intact, and we used vigilance to give her damage reduction while sprinting, so enemies mostly aimed at the rest of the lance that had no damage reduction, less evasion, and was in their face punching them. Amazingly, all 3 were still alive when Kamea reached the evac, but that was actually a bad thing as it meant the mission didn't end. There's no way to tell Kamea to evac alone, and while the Griffin could have reached the evac quickly, the others were slow as molasses and far away, as I'd never intended to save them. We had Kamea sprint back and forth with vigilance to increase her survivability, but some enemies targeted her anyway. I assume the AI favors priority targets to some degree. Thankfully, our heavier mechs were soon destroyed. The Griffin was still too far away, and its legs were damaged from a previous death from above, so we had it shatter its legs by death from aboving again so Kamea would finally get on the damn dropship. We got a Highlander 732B as a reward. I have no idea how Kamea brought it along, so don't ask. She didn't go back into the bunker. It was blown up to prevent the Taurens from looting it. In theory, it'd be an upgrade to our Warhammer WHM6Rs as it's 20 tons bigger, but in practice that isn't the case. As I mentioned earlier, the reinforced legs that allow for the famed Highlander burial with death from above don't exist in this game. It also has 1 fewer support hardpoints, only 3 jump jets, and lacks the optimized capacitors that increase our small lasers' damage. We tried it out in random contracts, and it simply doesn't have enough mobility for this run. But the double heatsinks it came with helped out our Banshee BNC-3M we were lucky enough to find at a black market. It's the only mech above 40 tons we've been able to use all the weight on, with 6 support hardpoints, up to 4 jump jets, and a massive amount of armor. It hits like a truck, but for once we don't have enough weight left to fill it with heat sinks, so it runs hotter than I'd like. Worth it though. The next mission is by far my least favorite. We have to keep enemies from blowing up 3 fuel pumps, 2 of which have almost no cover. At first, it doesn't seem that bad, as all the enemies are charging through a short canyon in the middle, and we have some turrets and 2 vehicles helping us out, and more importantly, giving the enemies more tempting targets than the fuel pumps. However, 2 more lances of light mechs, read fast and more than capable of blowing up a fuel pump in a couple turns, drop down on the right and left near the first 2 dropships as they land. The first lance isn't too bad, as the plateau they land on is large enough they spend their first turn running in, but the second lance that touches down with the second dropship on the left can immediately shoot their nearest pump. And all the while we have to draw the attention of the mechs charging up the center to keep them from reaching the pumps. We restarted once because on the first attempt they went straight for the pumps, in many cases running right by us. On the second attempt, we tried to be more aggressive, but our main form of movement is jumping, which generates a lot of evasion. Normally that's good, but having high evasion encourages enemies to pick other targets, so we essentially bent over and begged the AI to attack us by standing and punching whenever we could. On a side note, I noticed we never knock mechs down with a single attack, even if we fill the yellow instability bar. We only make them unsteady unless we destroy a leg, making stability damage arm mods less valuable since we need a follow-up attack to knock the target down regardless. In fact, increasing raw damage makes a knockdown in one attack more likely, as it raises the odds of crushing a leg, or simply crushing the mech entirely. Anyway, we sent one of our Warhammers to the right to intercept the mechs that touched down there, while our other Warhammers dealt with the Jenner charging up the center. Our Banshee went center-left in the hopes of drawing fire from the current mechs and the left lance when they appeared, and punched anything within reach. We focused on the light mechs. While letting heavier mechs reach the pumps would be a disaster, they are much slower and easier to distract with vehicles, turrets, or ourselves, while the light ones might only be in punching distance for a turn and blowing up a fuel pump the next. Even so, we had very close calls with the pumps on either side of the map, as the mechs in the 2 additional lances targeted each a couple times. The one on the left was hit by a Panther's PPC twice and was held together by duct tape and prayers. By all rights, we should have lost it, as the Panther had many more chances to shoot it. We were too busy dealing with the Battlemaster in the center that thankfully had a turret obsession to chase it down, but it got stuck somehow. It didn't even try to shoot at us when we got around to hunting it down. We take those. Next, we have to claim silos of valuable minerals for the restoration. Of course, they're rigged to explode, so we have to deal with the guards before they can set the bombs off. However, radiation prevents the enemy's sensors from detecting us until they have a line of sight, so we can creep closer before they start the countdown. We have to close in quickly to destroy the group near each silo in time, but despite bringing heavy and assault mechs, we can move at a respectable pace thanks to our potato farmers' growing skills and the 4 jump jets our Banshee and Warhammers have. It took longer than I'd like to train our Mechwarrior's piloting since we had to get to 5 guts and tactics first, even more to raise initiative with Master Tactician, so until recently our fights looked less like gladiatorial combat and more like drunken brawls everyone would claim to have forgotten in the morning out of sheer embarrassment. They're close to maxing out piloting now and have 4 or 5 gunnery, which is enough to hit the accuracy cap with small lasers and melee attacks in most cases, although death from above remains iffy. Sadly, attacks have at least a 5% chance to miss regardless of skill or other adjustments. Yay, nat 1s, my favorite. But between punches and our small lasers, we scrapped the guards in time to claim all 3 silos. Then we have to protect a spaceport so emergency relief can be delivered to Panzyr. If we take out the APCs, engineers will reactivate the turrets for us. While not as critical as they were for our blackjacks, the turrets are helpful, so we make a point of stomping the APCs as fast as possible. 2 of our warhammers go forward while the 3rd runs off into this forest. There were no enemies and thus seemingly no reason to head that way, but a couple APCs will drop there in a couple turns, and with only close combat, running to intercept them immediately was required. There's also a hospital on a nearby cliff we can protect by taking out an APC on this mountain path, so our Banshee sprints towards it. Sadly, it doesn't have many opportunities to attack since it has to prioritize speed, but it's more than tanky enough to shrug off whatever the enemies throw at it. To be honest, we could have ignored the APCs and taken out the enemy mechs without the turrets, so once we had them, the rest of the mission felt like a formality. Next, we have to help Kamea recover information her ally, Madeira, recovered from his family estate deep within Directorate territory. Of course, he's captured and his transponder was hacked to lure us into a trap that we must investigate with our entire lance. This means we're down in a valley when a bunch of enemies appear on a forested ridge, and Kamea insisted on bringing a bunch of illegal weapons instead of armor and jump jets, so while she can punch, her mobility and durability leave something to be desired compared to our mechs. She helps a bit against the first wave of enemies, but her armor was already dented, so we keep her in cover bracing while the rest of our lance handles the bulk of the remaining waves. We have to pummel several mechs on our way to the dead drop Madeira left the information at, and for once the enemies are doing more than just scraping our paint. Thankfully, none of our mechs lost any limbs, and the only component that got destroyed was a basic heatsink, but it was the first time they'd gotten through our armor since we started using warhammers and banshees. With the alliance between the Directorate and Taurens dissolved thanks to the information from Madeira, we can finally move against the Directorate throne world. We have to take out generators to disable their AA guns, and I was worried we'd have trouble reaching all 3 in time. We were held up near the first generator dealing with enemy mechs, including 2 annoying spiders that kept dodging and calling down artillery strikes, forcing us to make suboptimal jet jumps in order to avoid being blown up. However, they were the only side that took damage from the artillery after one of their genners attempted to melee us inside a strike zone. We were free to move away afterward, but they weren't. We took them down, blew up the first generator, and sent one of our mechs down the road towards the 3rd generator while the rest of our lance jumped up the cliffs towards the 2nd. 3 heading to the 2nd generator also had to deal with reinforcements, including another spider, but we ripped out its center torso immediately after it landed to prevent further artillery strikes, and cleaned up the remaining foes and the 2nd generator with ease, while our lone mech that went down the main road blew up the last generator. With that, and also a couple more pace-killing random contracts, we've finally reached the penultimate mission. We have to take control of a communication array to upload a Lost Tech virus to a rogue Tauren warship before it incinerates our forces. Considering it was easy last time, it should come as no surprise that it was easy this time. The game simply gives you way too much support, so even though it's dropping heavier mechs on us towards the end, we have so much firepower. I mean, maybe if we were out here in Locusts, it'd be a problem. We'll eventually get around to a Locust-only run, so we'll see how that goes, but it always just feels like this mission should be harder, and it never is. One of the APCs with engineers that can hack the turrets gets attacked and nearly destroyed, but the enemy's otherwise focused on us, so we got all the turrets on our side shortly afterward. Between those, us, and the 2 vehicles with 3 PPCs apiece supporting us from the entrance, the enemies were toast, and we spent the last 2 rounds of the holdout standing around scratching our backsides as the last trump card of the Directorate went up in flames. That brings us to the final battle, a duel with Kamea's cousin, Victoria. We faced her earlier when she was guarding the Newgrange, very ineffectually considering she only showed up after it was blown to bits, but now she has a King Crab mech with heavily upgraded autocannon 20s and flamers. Close range is the last place we want to be with this monster, but we have no choice. She's very difficult to knock down due to her high piloting. Her unsteady threshold is 4, meaning we have to fill up more than 4/5 of the yellow instability bar, and then hit her again to knock her down, which rarely happened. If we'd been able to attack her 3 times each round, it'd have been another story, but with one of our lance swapped out for the cheerleading Kamea and another occupied with the Jaeger mech and Awesome, we never had a chance to hit her 3 times in one round. Again, Kamea can punch, but we don't want her anywhere near Victoria, so she spends the fight bracing in a forest near the back of the arena, absorbing the occasional shot for us. And our 3rd mech was occupied by Victoria's lance for the whole fight. We quickly scrapped the Jaeger mech, but the Awesome and Caffract hold on far longer than they should, as 2 of our mechs are embroiled in a desperate brawl with Victoria and the Caffract. Her autocannon 20s deal a devastating 100 damage each, but her flamers are every bit as bad. One of our Banshees is shut down from overheating repeatedly by them. Right when it looks like it may make it out intact, Victoria's last autocannon 20 round takes its head clean off, killing Gale instantly and taking what little was left of her Banshee out of the battle. Thankfully, our Warhammer and remaining Banshee are mostly intact and mop up the Awesome and Caffract after finishing off Victoria, winning the campaign and proving that yes, you can beat Battletech with only close combat. Although in our case, the victory was somehow more costly than when we faced Victoria with blackjacks. To be honest, I wish there was an arena mode with less monologuing and more focus on close combat with upgraded mechs. It was nice to finally have an opponent that could push us a bit, even if it was due to OP weapons rather than intelligence. As I mentioned earlier, lighter mechs could have been a nightmare if they were smart enough to run away and shoot. But since they weren't, we were snoozing through the priority missions after we got Warhammers and Banshees thanks to our insane durability and evasion from jumping. It literally took a headshot from an autocannon 20 to put one of our lance down. Sure, not being able to attack at long range was annoying, especially when enemies wedged themselves on a small cliff or on a slope where the game insisted we couldn't punch them due to level geometry. But we could outlast them more than long enough to cut them apart with small lasers. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that run. If you did, please consider leaving a like and subscribing if you haven't already. It really helps the channel. If you want to support the channel directly, get your name in the credits at the start of challenge runs, and get access to new runs as soon as I upload them, usually a few days in advance. Channel memberships are also a thing, and you get all those perks for as little as $2 a month. But seriously, watching to the end, liking, and sharing all help too, and it gives me a better idea of which games you all want to see runs of. Sadly, the Blackjack's only run didn't perform well, so if you're interested and haven't seen it yet, it's in the challenge run playlist on your screen now. It's honestly hard for me to tell if most of you have no interest in certain games, or if YouTube has decided for you that you have no interest and hasn't shown some runs to most of you. On that note, I have a Blue Sky where I post all my challenge runs as they go public, so if you want to make sure you see all of them, follow me there. It's linked in the description. I'll play more Battletech regardless. Hell, I'll eventually play more Enchanted Arms, and almost no one knows what that game is. But I think I owe you all a couple Dragon Age Origins and Elder Scrolls runs first. See you all for those.